Selectmen, and Ken Lancha, Selectman from the town of Newington. And this is one of our regular meetings. If you don't, we started off usually with the salute to the flag. If people don't mind, we'll start that way. And then we'll turn it over to you folks.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you very much. May I ask if we can go around the table, everybody give their name so we all know who the players are, please. I'm Ted Cronus.
Ken Lancha.
Dina Champion, I'm Project Manager for the Seacoast Reliability Project.
Say you.
Dina Champion.
I'm Kurt Nelson with Eversource, and I do licensing and permitting.
I'm Maria Lacherno, Community Relations by Ted.
I'm Lauren Cody with Eversource. I provide public outreach for the Seacoast Reliability Project.
Jennifer Codispati, and similar to Lauren from Eversource, I provide outreach for the SRP project.
Logan Young, I'm with GZA, I'm involved with the landscape application.
First name again?
Logan?
Thank you.
Richard Hall, I'm a construction rep, generally in the field.
And Dennis Hebert.
Eleanor Boy.
Oh, sorry, Eleanor Boyd.
You're taking notes on.
So fell asleep again.
I'm gonna wake you up.
And Karen Anderson, Special Project Coordinator.
We'll leave it on you folks to look at your line.
Well, thank you for having us. We wanted to touch base again with a larger group today to recap what's happened in Little Bay, since that's such a big part of the project. And also just, go over where we've been and where we're going as far as the project status. So I wanted to discuss the construction that's been going on in Newington, and Dina Champy was gonna give an update on that.
Great. So, as you know, the entire project has been proceeding, not just in Newington. So we have completed the substation upgrades at the Madbury substation. Because the line, just as a reminder, goes from Portsmouth to Madbury. So we completed the Madbury substation upgrades. We've completed the Portsmouth substation upgrades. We've completed the line work on the roadside. So as you know, those upgrades went as well too. And then we've proceeded with the underground, and I know you're interested in Newington in particular, but UNH, we finished the underground there. There's some minor items that are miscellaneous items that are happening at the riser poles. Same thing with the underground at Newington, excuse me, the Newington, the gondola landing area. They're actually doing some demobilization there and cleaning up around those areas as far as the underground's concerned. So the manholes in place, the riser structures, the underground. So there's been a tremendous amount of work done, and as you probably have all been aware of, as you cross over Nimble Hill Road, the Frink Farm Hammer Land area, that underground is complete at this point, and you'll see the test set is still in the back, so they're planning on doing the final testing for the cable this week, and then that area will be demobilized as far as the underground work goes. So as far as the overhead, we're proceeding with multiple areas at the same time. So the crews are in here, they'll be doing the area from Gondola Landing all the way over down into Newington. So there'll be crews doing various parts of that work, whether it be installing poles, there's still some foundations to be installed, and running of wire, which you'll be notified of with any time that the helicopters will be doing work, and the same thing with the updates. So that's where we stand right now with the project. There's significant pieces that have been done. Our plan is to put it in service in the second quarter of this year. And obviously with the construction being done, following behind that, there'll be restoration and landscaping, and that certainly is weather dependent at this point. So we really can't do any of that if there's snow on the ground or a lot of rain, but if weather holds up, we'll start as soon as we can to have that available and try to bring everything back to the way it was, maybe not 100% before, but in good shape.
No, it's gonna be 110%, it'll be as good or better or equals what Eversource promised, right?
Correct.
All right,
Yes,
that's it.
yeah.
So when you said not as good as before, it makes me nervous.
Well, I just know the structure's out there, so I'm taking it from, if your perspective is, now I have a structure here.
Oh, okay, now I get it, yeah, you're
The
right.
landscaping, yes, the landscaping will be as good or better, yes.
So,
You say the helicopter, excuse me, the
Yeah.
helicopters are coming in. You're gonna notify us so that we can notify the residents, or how do you handle that?
Mhm.
Because that'll be
We
noisy and disturbing.
You're right about that, and we did, send out letters, which I'll pass around now, to the neighbors, so they know it's coming. But we also, we're willing to provide this for the town website, you know, Dennis had mentioned getting it on the town website, and I do have direct contact, either phone or email, with everybody along the route. So at this point, when I know the date, and I won't know the date until, you know, shortly before it happens, I'll provide that to each one of the residents.
Thank you.
We generally get 3 days notice,
Okay, thank you.
and we will provide you that.
I assume the FAA is all set, and the
Yes, sir.
people, the guard and so forth, and they're all been notified, so when the FAA is notified, they put bulletins out, I know that, so they
Yes,
go
sir.
through that. All right, good.
If I could just say something, I'm the person who takes all the phone calls from everybody who's angry. So you guys have done a great job notifying the neighbors and putting that all out, because I have gotten very little, people are very aware. And I've gotten very little pushback and calls about it. Everyone knows what's going on. So
We
I've been
appreciate
very pleased,
Thank you.
just from a personal standpoint.
I'll say that we acknowledge it's been disruptive over the last few months, but it's been
Yeah.
good to work collaboratively with the neighbors, and I feel like it's been a really good relationship, and Karen has been instrumental in
Yeah,
also
really
coordinating
good.
a lot of that communication.
Very good.
And as far as public outreach goes, I'll also say that we've been meeting with Karen and Dennis bi-weekly. So I think it's been a good communicative relationship. We plan to continue that throughout restoration, and I know that there are certain areas along the route that you're gonna wanna see, you know, especially Gondola Landing, take a walk down prior to restoration, to make sure we're all on the same page with what needs to happen.
Now, you're the one that sends out all the, basically the emails? Okay. I do wanna ask, and we spoke about this at one time, please send all the emails directly to the town manager, town administrator, excuse me, and a special projects coordinator. They will disseminate the information, and we certainly plan to take advantage of Dennis's expertise as we continue on with this. But I think it's very important that it first come to Martha, so we're able to be informed too in a timely manner. I would ask that you do that, please.
Okay.
And as far as I know, all emails to Karen, me, and Martha, that they've been continuously doing that throughout the entire project. There is nothing coming to me directly with, unless it's something that's very, very minor, but I can't even think of when that happened.
Yeah, maybe sweeping a road.
Sweeping a road or something like that, yeah.
Right.
Good, good, especially as we go into the final phases.
Sure, and it's important.
Thanks.
So also we talked about potentially seeing some of the helicopter work. It is really interesting, and I just wanted Rich to get a chance to explain what that notification process would look like for you guys.
Yes, they just give you 3 days notice as to when, and it's a matter of when they get there. So currently they're building the right-of-ways, putting the towers in place, framing them, and then it's a matter of flying the lines in. And what they'll do is they'll fly the ropes all in, and then the line crews will pull the wires in. So it's just a matter of being set up, so that's why the 3 days notice, not 2 weeks, not a month. Because it's just when they actually get to that point where they can fly them in, so.
And it's
That's
very
why.
weather dependent activity, obviously, so if you're out too much farther than that, you're really not sure anyway.
So do they pick up everything here, or do they land here and up, or how?
So they'll generally have a designated landing zone,
Yeah.
and they'll do their work out of that area, and then once they get in the air, they're kind of all over the place. They'll
Typically,
have one LZ.
excuse me, typically, what would be the hours of that operation?
We would work with whatever the work hours are. for the day. So if in Newington it's 7 to 7, it would be 7 to 7. They wouldn't get any extra bonus time because they're helicopter work.
You wouldn't be working at night though, would you?
Not
That darkness,
no.
darkness I'm talking about.
I mean, they could if they had to, but it's obviously, it's like anything, it's not what we want to do. So, not generally.
I think what Ken is referring to, like 4:30, 5 o'clock now, it's dark, so that would be kind of your day, I mean,
Presumably,
yeah.
but I don't wanna give away hours, you know what I'm saying?
No, that's it.
But, you know, for the most part, yes, I would say that's probably the case, but it doesn't mean we won't be working past 4 or 5 o'clock.
Yeah, but,
Just to give you an idea of how quickly they work too, they recently did this work at UNH and did 15 structures, between 8 AM and 2 PM. So they work pretty quick, and there's not a whole lot of overhead in Newington, so, as soon as we know, we can let you know, in case you wanna take a look at it, but it will probably proceed pretty quickly.
Yeah, what they're talking about is if any of you wanna view this, they're willing to, I think, I don't know if you want to stage a certain area for people to be in, or.
Yeah, that would be the idea.
That's what I think you reached out and was offering, and maybe you can talk about that.
it's not a helicopter ride?
No, I don't think a helicopter. They'll probably hang you at the end of the rope though, Ken.
I know you'd like to drive, but other than that, I don't know about everybody.
Yeah, so the guys that do the job are generally very willing to, you know, so hang around and you can see the helicopter and see how they do what they do. So that would be more or less at the landing zone, which of course, we would let you guys know where that is. So if you wanted to, say, bring the kids and have them watch what they're doing so they can see it up close, it's a pretty cool operation, right? You know, from a safe distance,
Right.
of course.
Would the landing zone be within the right of way, you think?
It depends.
in a
The guys
field, or
will
would it
set
be from
that up.
keys maybe, or?
So they'll fly it into the landing zone and then they'll have their work area from there. It's generally like a parking lot.
Okay.
Something of that nature.
But the key to this too is, the reason they're using the helicopters is it's so much faster.
Yeah.
You know, so that we can expedite the work and be done sooner, which is ideal for everyone.
And it's far less impactful.
Great, thank you.
Alright, what else you got?
Well, if there are no questions on the construction that's happened and is planned, then we'll move into Little Bay.
I do have some questions on the construction coming out of the Flint pit and a little bit out of Frank Farm in that area, that it's getting to be really, really muddy. Out of there last night, it was, I know you're sweeping it, I saw the sweeper go by, but you're pushing mud. When it starts drying up, it's gonna be really dusty. And I've had a phone call already from one person that wasn't happy with the mud that's all over the road. And he said, I understand construction, and I do too, but what can we do to try to make that better?
So I'm currently working with the contractor to get that swept regularly.
But the sweeping, I'm saying, like when it was raining yesterday and the mud was coming out, it's just making more mud. You know,
Right.
you take a clump that's this big, put it through the sweeper, it doesn't really move, it just
It just
pulverizes
spreads
it.
around, Right. I can certainly look into doing something to help mitigate that. I'll have to get with them and see what they can do to try to help with that location.
Alright,
And that's predominantly at Flint Pit.
it's really bad there because they're doing a lot of work coming in and out of there. I think they're not accessing the whole area, through the Frank Farm, you're going through the tire line, going into the Flint.
Yeah, the farm is kind of winding down, so.
But I think you're doing all the overhead work from the Flint pit area?
Yes.
Alright, so that's predominantly where the majority, there is still some here, like I come to it this morning. Wasn't terribly bad, but we need to stay on top of it.
Yeah.
Okay.
And we have been, and we're doing, at least with the sweeping for now, so I'll
Okay.
look into further mitigation.
Some roads are taking a beating, and we're about to get into the freeze-thaw cycles, and, you know, at some point, when, was it March, Ted, did we, the last part of March, or when we go into a thaw cycle?
Yeah, midnight.
And we talked about this at the SEC. Now, I think you're probably gonna be done, but if you hang around much longer, the roads are closed. All right, and this is one of the things we did talk about, but even with that, there's still damage that's occurring, and Gondola Landings is in some of the other roads, but Gondola Landing in particular, because of the pits that's down there and the marine cable coming through, saw a lot of trucks. And there's still a lot of trucks even going down in there now, just waiting to get into lining up to get into the Flint pit and go up into there, because they're waiting their turn for whatever reason, but they wait there on, and done the little landing. And the edge of the pavement is cracking, because they're pulling over and just waiting to be called. And they're loaded up, so I know we're gonna assess that in the springtime,
Right.
but I
Yes,
just wanted to bring that up to the selectmen as well, that there's probably gonna need to be some serious mediation done there. So,
I think it is good that we captured
Yep.
the road conditions with SW Full survey in advance of the project, and we'll be doing the post-construction survey to capture all of that and identify what needs to be restored.
Yep.
Yep, so I think it's good that team that negotiated the MOU had that foresight.
sure. And then there's just the distribution, underground distribution in Gundalow. I know they still gotta do the final section. Do you have any idea of when that's gonna be completed? Do you have a schedule on that yet?
Yeah, he said probably the end of the month, they got thrown off by
Oh, I
the,
know, weather. I can't even see them doing it at the end of the
exactly.
month. It's so wet where they gotta work, and
right, so they have the other two sections, but they, when I asked them about the status, he said probably the end of the month.
okay. And I see them making some progress on pulling the new cable, TV cable through. They got the wire wound up on the pole now. They pulled it through, they just gotta connect it. So, that's a good thing with those guys, right, Rick? You know that they're hard to work with.
Yes, sir.
The distribution lines, this is, I'm just talking to you about that, not Eversource. Eversource has done their part with the distribution cables and telephone poles along the road, and they've lopped off the top on most of them, am I correct? And it's just waiting for the cable company to do their part and remove the poles. And
The cable TV has to transfer.
Right.
And then the phone company will transfer, and then that's when the poles get removed.
correct.
Yeah.
So it was a matter of taxation, and as long as the old poles are there, they're still being taxed. And now you have new poles. So I just wanna make that as something that should be made. I've been talking to Lauren about this for quite some time. We wanna make sure that they don't just come along and just leave the poles there, just leave the poles there, and we're just sitting there with two poles.
Right.
The other thing that is a danger thing is what the telephone company or the cable companies have been known for is cutting the pole, strapping a section of the pole tied it to the other pole. It's really, really ugly. And then it's not a pole in the ground, so it's not taxed. And that's what and they leave it there for years. What the Durham is doing is they go into the PUC, and I've mentioned this to Martha, and I think Karen knew about it too, to tag up with Durham and to go to the PUC with them to get them to remove the poles. The whole thing, not just the section they cut out and leave it up there. So I think Eversource is really trying to do what they can to have good communications with them to try to take it down, but it's like talking to that wall over there behind you. So I think it might be a good idea if we haven't already, make sure we do tag up with Durham to try to get the PUC to force the communications company to do what they're supposed to do and do the right thing. But until then, I think we need to have the old pole still marked for taxation purposes and have a new number for the new pole, and that will be the new pole number that will be taxed. So I think it's up to you guys to call that, but it's one of those things of, that's making an incentive for them to move out of here.
That date is in April, when, if they're not removed,
Right,
they're taxable.
right.
But if
I
we don't have
also think-
but if we don't have a tax number, or if they took the old pole number and put it on the new pole, there's still two poles there with one number.
I understand that, I understand that.
Who removes the poles?
Phone company.
The phone company,
Depends
cable,
on
or
who owns the pole.
depends who
Phone
owns the
company.
pole?
Yes.
It's a phone company here, right?
Yes.
Phone company, yeah, okay, yeah, they agree to it.
But one thing that they're noted for, what's been tried elsewhere, like I said, they cut the
Lop it.
pole,
Yeah,
they lop it, leave a small section up there
Right.
hanging.
Well, I don't think it would be inappropriate at all to inform them that that's not acceptable for us, and that certainly sets up less than a safety situation where we now put them on notice now,
right,
as opposed to waiting until it happens and tell them that that's not acceptable.
So I did broach this subject with Mike Lynch, who's the DPW director at Durham, and the poles were actually completed, the upgrades were completed after Newington, and he's already gone to the PUC. And he said he'd be happy to share a template of what he had done with the town of Newington. And in the past, when he's done this, he's had pretty good success with it. He's gone to court once, and then within 10 days, they had to do their transfers and remove the poles.
Great.
Yeah.
So,
That would be great if you could send that template to me, I can prepare it for the board signature.
okay.
I don't mind,
You know what?
I know him.
Oh, good.
We,
With Durham?
yeah,
So Durham's not having an issue with that, or they currently are having an issue?
They
They
are.
have had an issue, and so they're just proactively reaching out to the PUC as of Friday to just go through that for the poles that were upgraded on Durham Point Road.
And they've had issues in the past with double goals not related to this project, so they've gone in the past.
thank you.
There's a lot of little stuff, but not now, really. I mean, unless you have something you wanna bring up or ask about.
That's all I've got for construction. We did want to talk about Little Bay and also the landscape mitigation restoration that needs to happen. So if you're good with them, we'll proceed with Little Bay.
Great. So just wanted to provide a quick recap of the Little Bay construction with the submarine cables that were installed. Construction is complete in Little Bay right now, and they have demobilized the barges. They've been removed from the project site right now. So right now everything is complete in Little Bay. And just wanted to provide you just some, high level information on some of the coordination that we've done, some of the work that we've done during the construction process, which work started, pre-construction work as well as the jet plow trial started back in September, early September. And so since then, we've been communicating with the town, with different property owners, and then other stakeholders in the bay, such as oyster farmers, as well as some of the other boating companies and charter companies that are out there as well. So we've been communicating with them, working with them as we go forward throughout the different phases of construction, between the pre-construction with the removal of the old cable, all the way through setting the concrete mattresses as we just completed. So that's kind of been ongoing. We've had that open discussion. And then just a quick note on the jet plow trial itself. That was a requirement, excuse me, that we needed to complete this trial, basically to ensure that we would not be causing irreparable harm to Little Bay. So we completed that trial on the 9th of September. The report with all the water quality monitoring that was done for that is on the SEC website. But ultimately, the sediment plume model that was predicted were conservative. And there were no compliance exceedances that we had, and then we were ultimately able to move forward, with the construction. And the trial demonstrated essentially that installing the cables with the jet plow could be accomplished in compliance with the state water quality criteria. So then we moved into construction. And I didn't know if, Dina, you wanted to go over that, or do you want me to provide an overview?
Construction for the
Frozen
crossing of Little Bay, yeah, that was basically, we did the jet plow part of it, then there was some diver burial that was also included. They installed turbidity curtains, again, per request of, or the requirements of the SEC. So there was diver burial in the near shore that had, they call them a turbidity curtain. It basically just encloses the area so that turbidity doesn't just proceed through the rest of the bay. And again, to Jen's point, there wasn't any exceedances, and I guess I wanna turn it over maybe to you, Kurt, to talk about the monitoring. I mean, we did some significant monitoring, thousands and thousands of tests were done, and basically, the results were good, so.
Yeah, I'll just briefly speak about that. Yeah, the water quality, so during the siting of the project, there was a lot of concern from interveners regarding the impacts to water quality of Little Bay, so DES took that to heart, and we had some extremely rigorous monitoring requirements that we had to adhere to for the project. In my mind, it's something that's never been seen. The scale of the sampling that we've done for the project is like nothing that we've ever seen in the industry. So take a wild stab, how many water quality samples we collected during that phase of the project? Wild guess.
800.
24,500 analytical data points. These are samples that had to be analyzed at the lab, not just meter readings, which we did thousands of those as well. 24,500 samples over the course of that duration of time we were in Little Bay. So, as you can imagine, the Norman Doe, our environmental consultant's going to have a final water quality monitoring report that looks like this. Literally, all the laboratory data is attached to it. So, the DES turned this into a science project, and it literally is I think there'd be some good research that will come out of it, but it was an awful lot of data that had to get collected. It was quite an effort. Really proud of the team that was out there. I mean, the poor guys in the sampling boats, they're out, and we were out there for hours and hours into the night and in rough conditions, and there they are trying to grab water samples. And so you can imagine what that, I think we had, was it 5 or 6 support boats during that time that had to do all of this sampling. So it was a very big logistical.
It was quite the operation, and it was out of Great Bay Marine. This is where the base of operations were, and just seeing, you had the sampling boats out there where the work was being done in the different locations, and then a boat would come in, would hand off the cooler of samples to some folks on the shore. They would take the samples, then they would have to, basically write all the information on the additional information on the sample, locations and everything, and then take that back, document all of it, and then have the laboratory pick it up. And this went on for hours throughout the whole operation. So it was definitely quite the operation.
Yeah, and I wanna say hours, but it was a 7-day-a-week operation because you have the very expensive barge out there as well. So once they deployed that, they had dive teams and everything. There was some instances where they did have to call it due to weather that they couldn't be out there. But on the whole, this team was going for as fast as they could, as long as they could to get the information and try to get the work done sooner rather than later. So it was an effort.
The work was tidally dependent as well, so that just being at the mercy of the tides as well was something that everybody had to work around.
I have a question with regards to the sampling. Are you talking now before, during, and after with the testing?
Yeah, there was, yes. So for the testing, there was various types of testing. For each time we were doing an operation in the bay, for example, a jet plow, we'd be taking samples 2 hours prior to the actual jet plowing, and then we would be taking samples, I believe, 2 hours after as well. There are a number of, we weren't just finding, for example, okay, there's a turbidity plume, let's sample here. We were also sampling upstream current-wise. So we have all kinds of baseline and background data to compare, potential effects from the jet plowing or the hand jetting versus what is it in upstream current direction. What is the sort of baseline comparison. So especially with turbidity, which fluctuates naturally, you're constantly trying to figure out, okay, at any given day, what is the natural turbidity level versus what is occurring due to the jet plow.
And what Kurt was referring to 2 hours before, but then it was hourly during jet plowing.
Correct.
And then
Yep.
2 hours after, so those crews that were working with Normando were out there extended periods of time to manage those
Yeah.
monitoring criteria.
Just a follow-up, is there any, post-testing, whether we're talking a month, 6 months, or a year from now, to go back and spot check?
That's a good question. With respect to water quality, no. We had several, in addition to water quality, we had several other, monitoring, obligations. One was with shellfish tissue sampling, so we were sampling oyster and mussel tissue. That was, again, a scenario, we sampled prior to any operations being done. We sampled during, and I believe, I'm trying to think of the time, that I think we took our last samples after the last hand jetting, if I'm not mistaken. There's a number of post-construction monitoring activities that have to go on with respect to the benthic, monitoring component, so the disturbance to the cable corridor as we put the cables in, there'll be, OSI will be doing a bathymetric survey. We have DES has set parameters as to what the bay floor will need to look like when we're all done. There will be benthic, community monitoring, so benthic, invertebrate and benthic creature monitoring. We've done, again, pre-construction, and now we'll have to do a post-construction monitoring effort on that this summer. So I'm trying to think if there's any other. We'll have eelgrass monitoring. We did eelgrass monitoring prior to this effort. My understanding in talking with our consultants was that we didn't, in our area, their assessment was that we didn't have any appreciable eelgrass, and we're thinking that post-monitoring of eelgrass, given what we saw in the pre-construction, that post-construction really wouldn't be required, and that obviously would be a decision for DES to make. And we've got salt marsh restoration that'll have to occur as well. So in the nearshore areas where there was disturbance to salt marsh, that'll be happening in the spring, I believe, yeah.
Right.
With regards to that, just out of curiosity, was there a photograph of the entire job as you went along? Was that photographed every inch of the way?
There's a lot of photo documentation. We have, in addition to that, we have drone footage. That was one of our conditions from the DES was to use a drone during the jet plow and hand jetting operations to help track where the turbidity might be going at any given time. So we have hours and hours and hours of drone footage on a big external hard drive.
So it would be possible to compare photographic-wise before and after?
To some extent, it wasn't, there was not a condition for us to use photographs to do a pre and post comparison like that, but I'm sure there's plenty of photographs that have been taken during the duration of the project.
Was that individual photography, or was it like a movie, on a movie?
It's both, Ken. I think they did both.
So we had, I guess as far as your interest in pre and post conditions, I guess, I mean, there was lots of photos taking up the work, just to document the work, often by the contractors, by some of the construction representatives, etc. Nothing with the intent that it would be used as a pre and post comparison. There's all these other monitoring plans that DES has laid out for us that will document that, so.
Now, those points of photography then were identified with GPS?
No, not necessarily, no. Yeah, so the drone footage which was again used to, was a tool used to track the turbidity plume throughout the active hand jetting and jet plowing operations. There was, like I said, hours and hours of video of that, and it primarily, and that is all, I believe, geo-referenced to some degree.
Thank you.
Yep, you're welcome.
Couple of questions for you. Do you have any pictures of the mats that will lay down at low tide and high tide? I know you put the concrete mattresses. I know you have them for Durham, but do you have any for Newington?
Those were recently completed, we can provide those.
I can get those.
Yeah, it would be kind of cool to have, and so people, they can see it from both. I know the landowners down there get to see it, but how close is the mats? I know you colored the concrete.
We did.
I know.
We tinted them for you.
Yes, I know. How do they match the mud pretty good?
I think so, but I'll leave that to you when you see the picture.
But I think it would be kind of cool to be able to see that. I don't think, I haven't seen them yet either. I'm just kind of curious what it looks like.
Yeah, we expect that what they look like today it'll be a lot different as time goes on.
Yeah, what's the barnacles and the snails and everything, you know?
Yeah, the seaweed
Yeah,
attaches.
I heard Norman Doe was really excited the other day because snails were moving in.
Already?
Yeah, they were very excited, so they have a new house out there, you know, with the concrete mattresses, so that's obviously the key is that the habitat would like the concrete mattresses as well.
I expect the seaweeds and so forth and the stuff will just
Yeah,
I think
get into that.
everybody's gonna join right in, yeah.
yeah.
Well, I guess we are moving along at a snail's pace.
You hurt me when you say that, I was trying to move things along as quickly as possible.
We're just being shellfish.
Now it's starting. You had to take it there.
I hadn't heard that one before. I think I'll have to keep that one, that's pretty good. You're in the right business though to come up with that, right? All right, so, I see whatever's left. Are there any other questions or any other cable? I thought it was, you're done with the manhole and all that down in there, correct? And you're restoring that now? It's just gonna be restored and planted fresh in the springtime with grass.
Right, well, they're down there, they're doing the final inspections today.
Yep.
So and that group is demobilizing at this point, so, there will be, there's some additional grouting that'll probably be happening tomorrow. Just kind of taking advantage of the weather as it is right now, and then in the spring, that's when, we'll do the final restoration in that area.
Okay.
Is DES involved in that final inspection?
I guess, because they always do environmental monitoring.
I don't know, DES certainly has a right to do, field inspection at any point during their review of the work. We have a requirement to provide DES with an as-built, plan and profile of the cable. And again, several, post-construction monitoring obligations that we'll have to meet. We'll provide that information to them and reports that they'll get. I'm sure at some point that the DES will probably wanna take a look on site and see how things are.
Thank you.
So I think DES would be concerned about the shoreline and how you've stabilized that. And I know doing it right now is gonna be really difficult. I know you're doing everything you can.
It's
Right.
done, it's stabilized.
Temporary
Temporarily,
stabilization.
Cause I saw a lot of straw going down in there, but on a pretty
Straw
steep.
and hay bales, and there's a turbidity barrier that, we
Okay.
actually have two that are out,
Yep.
in the Bay area, so there's a type 1 and then a heavier duty one, just to make sure that we have the environmental controls are in place, and,
Okay.
as you know, there's, water likes to go right down that hill there, so, that's why the stabilization the way it is.
Have you thought about using any, what do you call that, jute or that type of material to really hold down the
This
fires?
fabric there, not,
Oh, okay,
yep, it's underneath that.
okay.
Yep.
Good. In the future, if, say, 2 or 3 years from now, if that were to get washed out, is that something, say, erosion's going on, is that something you're gonna come in and repair?
We're working to, put together the landscape plan with Mrs. Beswick,
Yeah.
so.
Okay,
The
so I just.
plan is not for it to wash out.
I would hope so, yeah, I agree with you, but things
Yeah.
do happen, alright, so, alright. Alright, I don't wanna
But
get a
we
call,
are-
I don't
we're
wanna get a call from,
maintaining our
we don't wanna get a call from,
easement's still there too, you know that, right?
what's that?
So we still have an easement
Oh,
to
yes,
the
oh, yes.
manhole, cause there'll have to be periodic inspections.
You gonna let me peek in that manhole before you carve it off?
I was gonna bring pictures for you, Dennis, today, I'd show you the terminations and the
I
splice
would love to be able
boxes.
to see that.
Alright. I think they're pretty cool myself.
I
but,
do,
you
I mean,
know, I
I'm
wasn't
talking
gonna
from an
post it.
engineering perspective, I've done distribution systems and some minor transmission, and so I just interested in, splices in themselves are a real art, they really are. So especially trying to splice the two different types of cable together is really interesting. Alright, so the next thing was on the list was the landscape mitigation?
Yeah, so we did wanna just review what the next steps are, this spring. And to Dina's point earlier, we'd be doing the restoration and the landscape mitigation April through June, that's weather dependent. We have touched base with every property owner along the route as far as landscape mitigation and whether or not they'd be interested in that. So we've got plans developed, and included in that is the plan that we had agreed to with the option agreement at Woodland Hit. So we have something today, as you can see, it's our proposal for, that area.
And does that include the protection of the right of way, into the Pickering property? Right now, it's like temporary fencing.
This is not, but we can discuss that. This is more the roadside work. Woodland Hit.
There is a MOU in place on what they have to do, the plantings, we all agree that the plantings that were there were something that Eversource didn't even want, because they had plantings of like white pine, they're invasive roots, they don't wanna put them there. So they wanna come up with some other plantings, and we all agreed to put that off until this winter and try to resolve that this winter, so this is what you're proposing right now, right?
Yes, correct. So, what you'll notice that's different on this plan from any prior version you probably have seen is the removal of those larger tree species, for several reasons. And the replacement of these suggestions here, with the intent that they will provide visual mitigation from the road, into the easement, as well as be planting types that would thrive in that area and not require any maintenance on Eversource's end in the future. So it can be put in place, grow, thrive, survive, and not be subject to any future work. And then there's some examples of what these species look like on the separate supplemental page there.
So, do I talk to Dina or do I talk to Lauren on the speech at this particular time? 'Cause we did.
Logan, you can talk
Okay,
to Logan
I'm not
about
really
that.
sure. All right.
No, sure.
I have to look at the agreement, but when we final agreed to look at this plan, that the varieties of species would be decided properly sometime, but we also talked about putting it in what was the existing right of way, and that land still has to be transferred to Newington. I think as of right now, we still don't own that land that was swapped. Am I correct?
Well, we haven't,
Finalized.
we said we were gonna wait to, the construction, so
Yes.
it wouldn't be until construction is complete.
I agree, but I just wanted to, but in that existing right of way, we wanted to put some trees in there, to basically start growing trees to block that view to looking down the corridor. And that's one of the things that we were talking about. Also, in some of anywhere, I wanna make sure that any of the people who are in the crossing, like directly across the street from the Flint Pit, there's a wide open area now versus where there was some trees. And the owners there are, even the people on Gondola Landing were asking for that, even within the right of way, that there would be some trees put in and not directly over the electrical line, but that would be put there, to try to block some of that open field that was, before it used to be just trees there, and it sort of blocked that.
Sorry, do you mean the Raven Kerner property or?
So, on this, I'm not sure how far back you're going with, but I assume based on the dimensions that we had within the agreement, you'd be going back, I think it's 75 or 80 feet, with these trees.
I don't know, so this is
diagrammatic,
but,
diagrammatic.
approximately. I don't know if it would exactly be
The,
70 or so, but
Yeah.
that level of depth.
the other thing, I think, which is, I think Lulu was gonna probably come here for, and, cause she had already mentioned it to me, was that people are going up into here and just wanting to drive back there and snowshoe and so forth, but especially with vehicles, if we, I know you have a gate on the other side, but I think we probably should put some rocks or boulders in front of the, or within, and interspersed amongst those trees, so people can't just go down there, cause they'll just run over these small trees. I assume that they're not gonna be very big when you plant them.
That is a possibility to put boulders.
Because otherwise, people are just gonna drive over them. Ted, I think you know what I'm talking about.
Absolutely.
Yeah. So I think that'd probably be a good idea. We wanna keep
Okay.
people from driving down there, I guess is the thing. And then I guess it's gonna be a lock gate, and you're gonna have a lock into a lock, where the town will have a lock and you will have a lock, so either one of you can open it up. That's what we'll
That's
agree on.
typically what it's done.
And then the existing road that's there now, which is all gravel bed and so forth, you're gonna be removing that, putting it back to the loam that's underneath it, and it's gonna be shifted over to the other side, over the existing, where the cable's buried.
I was understanding that we were gonna leave the gravel and put loam on top of that, and that way if we have to go on top of that again, that it'll be stable, but it will certainly have something that can proceed to grow, and that way it wouldn't be, we wouldn't actually go into the gravel and sink with any heavy equipment.
Alright, so that's not what the agreement was. The agreement was that the road was gonna be on the other side, and that the gravel was gonna be, that you put down in the wrong place, was gonna be moved. And that's what the agreement says. So,
You
I have
mean
no
in the
mind.
option agreement?
What's that again?
You mean in the option agreement? I'm just trying to understand what agreement.
Yeah, the option agreement, because there was no other agreement that was done, it was just the option agreement. I have no problem if that's what we wanna do. I'm just concerned that a tree or a plant will not be able to grow where that gravel bed is right now, because it's such rocky material and gravel material, I don't think it'll ever fill in correct. There's supposed to be a gravel road, just so everyone knows what I'm talking about. The gravel road is where the trees are now. The cable is over here, they show in all the drawings and so forth that the cable, the road is gonna be on this side, and this was gonna grow back natural, that was there. And that there was gonna be natural dirt that was gonna be there, and they were gonna be able to grow naturally, reseed naturally. And that we agreed upon plantings here, and we're talking about plantings over in here, as well as in the back here, just to get the trees growing to block the view that's open right now. That was what I think everyone agreed upon. The issue came up as when I brought up the fact that you had pine trees growing there, and oaks and things that were gonna be getting into it, and I said, someone wasn't paying attention when we did this, and we all said, yep, you're right, but that's the plan we have right now, that's in the option agreement, to have those kinds of trees growing there. So this is something we're coming back to, and that this road, when it was going down, I brought it to everyone's attention, that is supposed to be left natural, would be the gravel and stone that's being pounded into the dirt was gonna be removed.
Yeah, that is a need before putting any plants in to disturb that gravel to prevent compaction. That's already there. It does need preparation in that sense.
Okay, but it goes down 2 feet. I mean, they put a lot of rock there. I'm just saying that the trees are not gonna grow there. So, and it was agreed that this side, in other words, when we were gonna be done and the trees have grown, we're gonna see a 25-foot opening with and trees on both sides. What you're proposing now is something that's gonna have very little chance of growing any trees, and that this easement for construction purposes was only gonna be used when you had to do more future maintenance construction on the existing line, and you had to take them down and replant them. But that this side was gonna be allowed to grow back natural, and that when you put down the rock and so forth, the road bed that's there, that when we brought it up, we said, all right, we made a mistake, we will take it out when we come back, and that way there the trees will be able to grow, and that's what was agreed upon.
I will say that we are providing a warranty for these plantings, so we're not gonna set them up to fail. in
No,
that
all
sense.
you're required to do is plant this. But back here, and if, I'll show you the drawings, it says it's gonna be allowed to go back natural. It can't grow back natural if it's packed rock. And that's what I didn't wanna get to this point where we're at right now, because I thought that's where we were all talking. And I have the documents that says that that's all natural,
We
and it's
did
signed
talk
by
about,
everybody.
yeah, that is in there.
Okay, so, I would like to be able to talk with the selectmen about probably what we want to do, but, at least this is a start. I just wanted everyone, so everyone knows where we are from and what we wanna do, but the intent was 25 feet here, that's all it's gonna have an opening with, and everything else is gonna go back. It's just gonna be very difficult to roll back anything if there's a road base there with 2 feet of rock and gravel that trees just don't like to grow in.
That is understood. The details of that are, part of the construction that's still going on. What the result of that gravel access will be like.
So, I just throw that up there, I think we need to resolve that sooner versus later. But the planting's the only thing I thought we had to resolve. I was with the understanding that the gravel road was coming up, so. Do you wanna think about that and get back to us?
Yes, I defer to you.
Yeah, I would like to, because, that, and maybe I wasn't involved in this conversation, but, to leave the gravel the way it is, and that allows that construction to happen, but to do plantings on top of it, so put down some loom on top of that and let that continue to grow, whether it be, wildflowers or something along those lines, so that if it does have to be accessed, that would facilitate any access at that point without having to, take down trees. I mean, obviously, trees are gonna have, take a long time to grow in that area. So, I don't know what kind of natural trees would, if it comes back naturally, cause we're only doing the plantings at the beginning, there might be some overhang from the adjacent trees, but I think even wild, I'm not gonna say natural species in there wouldn't particularly come up, and fill in the whole area, so.
Well, that was the intent, but there had to be soil there to begin with, and just putting a skim soil over some rock isn't gonna grow trees. And I had an enormous amount of effort that went into this discussion, and I still have all the emails that was agreed upon.
If it was agreed upon, then,
So, I'm just
all
trying
of
to,
them on that.
Will you review it and get back to us,
That's it.
please?
Yeah.
That's the best way to handle it.
I think it's the best way we should do it, I agree. So where else are you doing the natural plantings? Have you gone along the roads and so forth, like the Franks, there's other things, where's you gonna plant? Who was it that said they don't want trees, who was it that said they do want trees?
So we do have certain road crossings that are required by council for the public for us to plant things along, and that does include Nimble Hill Road.
Yep.
Fox Point, so.
But it also includes anyone along the right of way.
Correct.
That's what I'm surprised that the SEC said that. What I wanna do is make sure that the people that you're talking to have the understanding that they do have rights to ask for some plantings along the right of way. And I think we should probably have something along that line where we put it out on our website so that people do know that. Because otherwise people are sitting there and say they don't know their rights.
I don't disagree with that at all, I just do wanna say for the record that we have brought that up in every conversation we've had with.
That's good, and I think that's good.
It's not a secret, so.
I just wanna make sure people know that.
Okay.
Alright? So if we can get something like that, that allows us to, if the selectmen would want to put it on our webpage, I think it'd be a good thing, or even a mailing or something like that. Does that make sense?
Review it, yeah, makes sense to get us in.
I do know that people along Hannah Way were a little concerned when the initial cutting occurred.
Right.
I spoke to many of them directly.
Yeah. And they think they've already agreed to come to an agreement with you what you're gonna plant there. Am I correct on Hannah Lane?
Yes.
Yeah, they've got a pretty aggressive planting program. I know they were pretty active, but other people may not have been. So,
Well, I think a point should be made that, we've been very proactive in trying to initiate the conversations as well. And I believe we have made that, attempt with each of the properties along the line in Newington, which everyone's been very receptive to so far.
And we've already got plans developed for most of them too. So they've already been finalized by the property owner.
Along Hannah Lane, was it just timbers that were installed to ride on, or is there also gravel below the timbers?
Hannah Lane.
Yeah.
Excuse me?
There was both, because it did, as you know, it got really muddy, so, it really took a lot to, make sure that traveled way was open for the construction that had to happen at the riser park structures.
And so we did agree to bring it back to lawn for each one of those people.
So the restoration would be addressing that gravel as well.
Right.
Good, thank you.
So when do you wanna meet? I guess I can talk with the selectmen and the conservation group, because they usually do look at the trees, but I'll talk with the selectmen and, but right now, what I wanna make sure is they may not know the details of all the parts, I just wanna make sure they understand what we've agreed to.
We thought it'd be good to digest this and,
Yep.
you know, today it's very congested over there, but we'd be happy to meet on site with you and
Sure.
discuss this further. Sometimes it's just better to
Yeah,
see in person.
I agree, we all agreed last year that the team plan they had was a minimum by which we're gonna go by, that's the worst case scenario in the sense of plantings, and that you wanted to change the plantings, and that we would have some options, once you went in there and we got things sort of wrapped up, to look at it and decide what's the best trees gonna be to go in there and so forth, so, I think it's doable. I think right now it's just a question of what's the medium these trees are gonna be growing in if the rock bed's left in place.
Oh, no, the trees, like you're saying, that, and Logan said it too, certainly, we're not gonna plant trees in gravel.
No, it's the rest of it back there that's gonna go back natural, and that's the note I'm going on, so I would like to meet with you soon on that, if we could. How far back is the proposed gate? Cause on the plan that I have, I thought it showed it back a little bit further than that. Cause if you put it where it is, I think people are gonna be able to drive right around it. I think you need to, is that just diagrammatic where it's gonna be going?
Rich, can you
This is diagrammatic.
Okay, alright.
explain how far back we usually do that?
Yeah, so what I would do is, if I was proposing it, I would put it back so that a vehicle could drive up to it.
Yep.
And be off the road.
That's what I was
To
thinking.
safely open the gate and then drive through it. So, you know, however, I'd say as long as a bucket truck plus 20 feet maybe, something like that.
Okay.
Could you say something about the size of the gate? So that, smaller vehicles, ATVs or snowmobiles or dirt bikes can't just ride around the edges of your gate?
I think that's what we talked about, some boulders, ways that if the gate is closed, there won't be vehicle access.
So like in this white area, that's what you're gonna put? Because the white area here doesn't have anything to prevent access. Is that like a big slope or something, or?
Right now, there's an open area by that telephone pole right in front of the pond, and the skating, that little skating house. Yeah, that's not gonna be touched, but they're gonna put the gate in a way that people can't go around it, that's what we were just discussing.
Yeah, so you can't.
It looks open, but
It's
and
not.
if you go out there, it's really not open.
Yeah. And we
It's,
talked,
it's
I think you
wood.
weren't here, Lulu, we talked about putting boulders in and through there
Yeah,
to
she
make
was-
sure people
she's
can't get
here.
through.
So could we talk about the other side of the Flint pit when you guys get a chance? Hi, Lauren.
Hi Lulu, how are you?
This I really appreciate, because I think what you do here is going to be a deterrent to get people into this part of the property. But there's a lot of ways that you can access that whole Flynn pit area. And when I was walking down through that area with one of your subcontractors, we came to the Pickering property line, and you wouldn't even know, there's no remnants there at all of where the property line used to be.
Sure.
The brush is gone, the trees are gone, whatever used to be there that would signal you're crossing from public property to private property is gone. And so then, and we've had people coming right through there. And so I don't know whether that's something where you can stake the same kind of keep out things, or whether you can put boulders, because the demarcation of the boundary has been obliterated for at least 200 feet.
Okay, what's your preference for marking that? Is it the sign?
Can you speak up, please? I can't.
Sorry, what's your preference for, marking that? Is it the boulders or the signs?
I think long-term, the boulders would be more effective, but, I mean, even if there's 2 signs that are keep out, at least you tell people, but I know if you have cut 200 feet of boundary, and you're only gonna come down to 20, is it 50 feet right of way that you have there? So what can be done to reestablish that boundary line? At one point, there might have been stones there, I don't know, there were certainly trees at one point, there was certainly brush or something at one point that would say, you're crossing a property line.
Yeah, I would suggest definitely putting keep out signs in private property. The right of way is 100 feet wide. So definitely no trespassing signs identifying that.
What about plantings outside of the 50 feet to fill in where it's been cleared 200 in that area?
Yeah,
Is that what you're
the center line, didn't you clear 100 feet on either side of the center line?
We 50 feet on
Okay, so
either
you
side.
cleared 50 feet.
Yep.
And, is that going to stay at 50 feet right of way? I don't have the map.
It's 100
in front
foot
of me.
right away. That's gonna stay 100 foot right
It
away.
is, okay.
Yes.
So, when it's between my sister's property and my property, we don't care because, it's just us. But when you have that boundary line between public property and private property, nobody knows. And because you've removed all of the boundary markings, absolutely nobody knows. And so, even if you have boulders on the ends, like at your 50-foot ends, something that reestablishes here's where the property line is. And then we can put the keep out signs in the center, but it's completely wide open.
Yeah, end of easement. End of easement, do not enter or something.
I mean, I think we can put a gate at that property line as well, so that's an
That was
option.
my thought.
Yeah.
There's not a gate in there, we use
Gate and boulders, I think that
both,
would
both
be,
sides, yeah, I agree with that.
because that's definitely a valid concern if you've got people on town land and, that's a courtesy we extend to a lot of property owners, so, where there's a trespassing.
saying?
I think that's a better solution, that's an obvious, solution.
I have a question with regards to the restoration of the ground. Considering, Gundelow Way all the way through to Fox Point Road. Just out of curiosity, when you restore that, will they be restored at the same elevations that were there at the beginning?
Ken, I'm not following you, you said Gundalow to Fox Point.
When we get over near, where it comes up, there still is timber laid all the way across the field. So my question is, whether it was above or below, I'm looking at the elevation when you're done. Because that certainly plays into drainage, right, Dennis, that we were talking about just last night, that the elevation should be the same as they were originally.
Oh, I see what you're saying.
So that the ground or the land on the uphill side can drain as it did prior to
Naturally.
any disturbance. So the question is, will the elevations be the same, right, straight across?
So, I'm trying to recall where you're thinking of that. Has the
I think he's talking about anywhere between Gundelow Landing and Fox Point Road, right up the road here.
Right.
All of the stuff that was done there, where you put in the matting, or gravel, or whatever you did, is it all gonna be restored back to original elevations?
Well, also the timbers.
And the timber,
When you take the timbers out.
yeah, I meant the matting, timber matting.
Yeah.
That's why I'm
sorry.
saying, basically, the whole distance is gonna be addressed, so I was curious on the elevations of those of the land when you're done.
That's been an item that we discussed with each individual landowner, if regrading is needed, because the timber mats, compress the grass and it's no longer the same as it was before. That is an element that we've included in each individual plan.
So, to answer the question, the elevations will be the same when you're done as originally prior to any work.
here's a reason why Ken's so concerned about that. For example, Hannah Lane has certain drainage features when it was developed that was required by the town to maintain those features, for proper stormwater management. And if you've gone and changed that, and for example, down by Nimble Hill Road, where you cross over to, Hannah Lane or to the Frank Farm, that seemed to have been disturbed there. I'm not sure if it was by Eversource or if it was done previously to Eversource being there, I don't know. But the drainage there has definitely changed, and we had some issues there this past fall, and Rich, you remember that? So I think, I'm not sure what the outcome of that was completely, but I think what Ken's getting to, if we change the storm drainage, storm runoff, it's not gonna change the dynamics of the area. It could be creating wetlands, and that was the other thing, there were some places there that you have created a wetland if you don't fill it in, and it will start growing, and then you're gonna have a nightmare dealing with that in the future if you wanna drive over it again. So I just wanna make sure that you do properly restore that, as Ken is talking, because it will create some problems for us, and we don't want any. We have enough to do.
Dennis, I thought you told me a few months ago that that whole area was, Eversource was taking care of that whole area, taking care of the drainage in there, because they disturbed it.
I thought that they did, and I'm not sure what the outcome of that was, Rich. Do you know? I thought Altus Engineering got involved in that with Karen. Do you know anything with Martha? Do you know if it was?
I thought it was all resolved.
I thought it was too, but I'm not
If
positive.
you're talking about the culvert under Nimble Hill Road,
Yeah.
the Altus had said that that was on the town's radar before SRP came
Okay.
up, so they were going to address that.
I thought that was
They
the
had
case.
had questions from the Franks about it, so they were
Yeah.
concerned.
Right now, what's happening, there's a Liatza subdivision, and that Liatza subdivision, the stormwater is gonna be could affect Hannah Lane in that drainage.
Right.
So, it's on the radar, but I couldn't remember, I think you're correct, or my memory's correct. That Altus said that particular drain pipe was an issue
Right,
before
it
you
was a
started.
pre-existing
Pre-existing
condition.
condition. So, I thought that was
Yeah.
resolved, Ken, when Ted and I talked to you about that.
Is it reasonable then to ask you folks that if it's not gonna be that way, before you leave, you would inform the town?
About private property, I think.
No, I'm talking about the elevation of the land, because that's crucial to drainage. And the drainage is crucial to what happens with the standing water, especially with the pollutants coming out of Pease. So impeding the drainage is not what we wanna see at all. So is it reasonable to ask you that if that's gonna be a problem, or you're not gonna do that, you'll inform the town?
I don't know why we wouldn't put it back to the way it was. I mean, the intention is to restore.
I think that was the,
Yeah.
that was the requirement that you do that, yeah.
Okay.
I think the issue at hand a little bit too is, when you're talking about drainage, I think from our side of the table, we're a little bit, I think it depends on the degree of change in elevation. A small change in micro topography can potentially alter a drainage pattern, or, that sort of thing, and do we have, what level of ground survey did we have prior to start of construction versus post-construction? We don't, we probably had, 1-foot elevations or something like that, but it's not typical on right-of-way work for us to have very exacting, pre and post, surveys where we're really focused in on ground elevation. That being said, I don't think there's any, certainly I'm not aware of any area where there's a significant alteration in elevation, but when we're done and we're pulling out and we're moving mass and we're restoring and grading consistent with surrounding areas, can we say with any certainty that we're not 6 inches off? I don't know that we'll be able to do that.
Micro is one thing, 6 inches is quite another thing, and the reason why I keep asking this is, we have groundwater and surface water that contains PFOs, PFAs, right? And if that is currently draining down into the bay through one of the streams, then if it by any means is restricted further out, the water's still gonna come. And what happens is the PFOs and PFAs spread right out on the ground.
Exactly.
And that's why
That's our concern.
asking the questions.
So I'm gonna say another thing. You have, like, there's a couple of places out there that I know about in the Flint pit where there was some deep ruts for the machines. Those will become a micro wetland.
We will fix those.
And I know that, but I think for a minimum, I mean, that's common sense to do that. I wanna make sure that we do that, but also I wanna make sure you're not creating a wetland, even if it's just 4 inches. If we see pooling, we need to resolve it. Because it's just gonna be a wetland for you in the future when you have to go in there and work. And it's gonna be a wetland, especially like in the Flint pit where there wasn't a wetland. We don't want it because we may wanna use that land someday. So we don't want to create wetlands. That make sense?
Yes,
Oh,
absolutely.
absolutely.
So I think
Plus.
working with us, I think we've talked about that in the past, and I think we sort of like agreed to it. It's we talked about when you started construction, and I think we're now at the other end of it. It was just reiterating, and I think the selectmen are rightfully concerned about that, as we have been. As I have been.
This is well, and I think once they start in that, we'll have to be there with our engineers to observe it.
Right,
And
I
work
agree with
together
that.
on it. I think we can
I agree
beat this
with
to death right now, but until we get
Right.
it and see it, we don't know which way we're going. That's my recommendation.
Absolutely, and I'm not gonna, keep harping on this, but just so that you get a feeling of the understanding,
Yeah.
there are people out there with, animals that will not allow them to drink the water because of the pollution. They have to bring it in, so I don't wanna belabor it anymore.
We're
but
not
you
in
get a
Mexico,
picture.
right?
What's that?
We're not in Mexico.
Right. Thank you.
No, that's good feedback, thank you.
We're well aware of the groundwater issues.
Yeah.
The very costly,
Yeah.
element of this project was groundwater management.
Right.
Speaking of that,
Uh-oh.
cost, one of the things we talked about in December before the holidays is you heard that Christmas was coming and that there was gonna be a big gift and a number you're gonna give us today for what you thought the cost of the project was gonna be and what the town could look forward to in taxes.
So I do have some information for you.
Good question.
So, as you know, the cost of the project went up. We had identified it to ISO, and we had identified it to, and notified the New Hampshire SEC as well. So we basically, the cost that we provided in the amendment back in March of 2017, I looked back and I thought, was it really that long ago?
It was.
Yeah, was 84.3 million. And with the adjustments for inflation, escalation, and primarily the duration and the extent of permit conditions was the major cost. The project went up by about 40 million. And the new number that was provided to ISO and New Hampshire SEC was 26.8 million.
So it's to be a total of 126, is that what you said?
126.8 million.
I thought you said 26, okay.
No, that would be a bargain basement.
Yeah,
it would be, yes. Did you say 126.8?
126.8 million, yes,
That's tough.
yes.
And you don't have the Durham Newington part yet, do you?
I started to do the breakdowns, but I've been going through internal reviews of that, because, you know, we actually started it later than we planned, so, going through some of the documentation that was previously presented and the appendices by the economic expert. So anyway, I've just been reviewing this internally, with the dates, when those assets become taxable assets and that type of thing, so, I don't wanna say that Lauren gave you bad information. I've just been going through this for several weeks and I'm still not at a point where I can disclose that, number without vetting it through.
Probably would be proportional to what it was before approximately.
I would say that is a reasonable assessment.
Yeah.
I'll throw it out there that way without putting too much a disclaimer in there. But what I was also asking is when are the dates that when this becomes effective? So, you know, we're putting some, items will be, we call it unit to plant, we'll identify the unit to plant, we'll identify where it gets put in what town. So there's a procedure that I just wanna make sure it's clear on when the town will see that tax revenue and what kind of tax revenue the town would see.
Yeah.
So those are the things that I'm working on, so that's why I apologize for not giving you the whole story, but,
Well,
it doesn't happen
I wasn't
really
gonna let you off the hook on this.
I wasn't looking to get off the hook, I was actually hoping to get like one more thing taken off my plate, but it's not there yet, so, yes, we'll continue working on that internally to get you those numbers, but
We
obviously.
discussed reconvening when it's in service too, to get more final numbers anyway.
Sorry, I didn't hear you.
We discussed getting back together after this is in service to get more final numbers
Okay.
anyway.
All right, thank you.
Anything else? Thank you very much, appreciate it.
Thank
Great-
you.
Great insight, very nice, thank you. And we're still looking for a helicopter run.
He is, okay.
I'm ready.
This is the part with Lulu on the General Sullivan Bridge.
Where are you? Not for you folks, this is.
Oh, no.
You can stay if you want, you guys are lucky, you can stick around if you want.
That's about a 49% increase.
50%.
About 40, yeah, and what that'll mean is.
You know, it's very nice to see so many women representing such a big project. Congratulations. Thank you. And really, I'm Jennifer. What he has estimated
It's not complete. Are you talking about the utilities along the road?
You're still here.
Thank you very much.
I mean, you have a voucher.
On the transmission?
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you so much, appreciate it.
I've been on this for 5 years.
Okay, so we'll be,
Yeah, we'll leave it
we'll
We're good, thank you so much.
Thank you. Thank you, good to see you.
Rather than seeing my big increase.
I know. Oh, good for you, enjoy.
Thank
Going
you.
someplace special?
Florida.
Oh, good for you.
Girls trip.
I have a lot of copies, I can go to your website and find,
All right.
All of the
We got
section
Lulu.
106 things that you did, so those are all there, but you have a version phone. You might even have some neat drone footage, that'd be good to have.
Sure, we can do that. We'll be in touch.
Well, this one shouldn't take long. They can't have it 2:30, so we have to
We
let.
have 2:30 with our attorneys and like that, so.
I would rather, rather than shortening you and your thoughts, that if you don't feel comfortable with that, we
We can come back.
reschedule.
Yeah, no, I'd like to
I don't
do a
wanna-
cursory review of this, because there's a timeline in it, and we can look at that, and then if we have to, we can come back. That's
So I think the next time I'm up in Concord is the 24th, is that the
Right.
Friday?
Yes,
Yeah,
yeah.
so that's the window that we're operating in. And we don't have to go through, a lot of the detail, but in a nutshell, this is going to be evidently the biggest historic mitigation that the state has ever done, so I hear, but that doesn't mean much.
No,
Right,
No.
they haven't dropped the dime on what the dollar is.
I was just gonna say, where's the bottom line on that? Yeah, right.
And so it's still a battle to try to get what we want. Whereas before I might have said we were 90, maybe 10% where we wanna be, now I think we might be about 45, 50% where we wanna be, to give you an idea.
You're talking mitigation value or project?
Mitigation value for me. It's going to be very hard to get funding for the Old Stone School, although I'm still pushing.
Well, we know you.
If we don't get it for this project, we're just setting up how we might get it in the future. So we gotta keep pushing on that.
Absolutely.
I think I spent 2 hours talking to the consultant who's been hired to work with DOT. And her best advice is, in the past, Newington did not get the railroad depot, because when we were specifically asked what would we do with it, we said, we don't really care about the building, but we love the land. And they put a big line through that and said Newington's not ready to assume ownership. So that was a real big hint, that if we want to say that they've got to transfer it to us now, we have to propose to them what we're going to do with it. Now, there's a whole range of things, and the easiest for us and the cheapest in the long run is to be able to say it would be used for events, like if somebody wanted to have a wedding out there or have a party or whatever, the downstairs part of the building would have bathroom facilities or a kitchen or whatever that could work for events. And that long-term, to keep the property in shape, we would consider renting the top part of it. Now, that's the Strawberry Bank model that says you have a public-private use of a building.
Yep.
The rental income is used to pay the bills that you have to pay for maintaining the building.
Correct.
But from the thing on how is it gonna be easiest for us to get the building, that's something that is not asking for a big public use that would have to satisfy all of the, ADA requirements and all of the different things that,
Right.
of elevators or, whatever. So the details that we kind of have to figure out as we think about it, is you can't trust the state. So when you say to them, what's on the table for the mitigation is they will bring this building completely up to a usable state for the town, inside and outside. And then the town will assume control of it and have in mind these uses, outside land, the building use. But we need to define to them what we consider to be what the building has to be brought up to. They don't want to say bring it up to code, but we do need to say to them, it needs a septic system, it needs water access, it needs electricity, it needs the inside, how are we gonna treat the windows, what kind of a heating system is it gonna have? Outside, I found a couple of fantastic photos, which you can keep these because they'll be something that intrigue you. There's 5 of them, so take one. We can ask them to recreate the platform along the outside of the building, where you used to come out of the building and then use that to get onto the railroad.
Right.
And so we
If you have
can't,
authenticity of the building, what you're saying.
exactly, we can't
Okay.
ask them to make steps.
No,
Yes,
no, you
but
can't.
we can ask them to
Or platform.
recreate the platform.
Right.
We need to put our thinking hats on about the more specific we can be in terms of, here's the kind of heating system we envision, here's the kind of insulation that we have in mind that we have to put in, here's the window treatments that we want. The better off we're going to be, because honestly, these guys will try to weasel out of everything. But the bottom line is, they've heard me complain vociferously. They had a 6-month interval where I guess DHR beat up on DOT in the background. And they're putting together something called a bridge management plan, so this quote never happens again in the future. And I told them all that is another checklist that DOT will go check and do nothing on. But the consultant said to me that she thinks we've had Keith up against the ropes. She thinks if we come in and say, this is acceptable to Newington, the transfer of the property, the state has to bring all of the outside grounds and the building up to usability with a public use on the bottom for rental use, which evidently is a lot cheaper than public, access, historic museums.
Less requirements, right,
Whatever. She thinks that we can get that. And
And
so,
we have to specifically say though, for recreation,
Yeah, right.
historic, public event.
Right,
Similar to
Private event.
Strawberry Bank, so very similar to that.
No, you need that by the 24th?
Well, no, I brought, what I wanted to do today, and you haven't got time, because I was gonna make you guys think, but you don't wanna think, we're all tired.
We've been thinking all day.
Yeah.
Nap
I had
time.
my mind thinking too many
Well,
different
I would like to schedule another one so we can give the time you need.
So you can think of-
Yeah.
I'll give you some homework.
All
I
right.
agree with Kenny on that, I really do
Yeah.
think we should use more valuable time for that.
What I would like to have the next time I go to Concord,
Mhm.
and I don't want you to send it to them beforehand, because when you do that, you lay all your cards right on the table. I'd like to have 2 documents, and the first one would be, here's what we want you to do. And that would be what this one looks like, and I was just kind of mocking these up. But then the second document is, we get into discussions, would be, no, here's really what we want you to do. Here's the breakdown. So, when you negotiate these things, with those guys, you do it again in pieces. I had written all over one of these, I'll keep the one I wrote all over.
This one basically opens the door, this one here
Yep.
tells me what we want to
This
do.
is excellent.
Okay.
So the first one opens the door, and
Right.
Keith is starting to feel, oh, good, I can see the light at the end of
Right.
the tunnel, I can.
Right, if we do his
you know,
work for him, it's gonna go through.
Yeah, and then, you know, you end up with snotty something that can't be used.
No, we don't want that.
If you look at that first map, again, and it's part of the negotiation, we're still asking for all
Both
of the
sides.
things in color, both sides.
Both sides of it.
Absolutely.
And the highway right of way right down the middle will never, you know, that's theirs anyway.
Right.
And the only thing you really have to wrap your heads around is, we didn't get this property in the past because we did not have a believable use of the building. And they didn't believe that we were going to do anything with the building.
Okay.
So
So then at one time, the town refused to take that also?
yes.
I
they
heard
did.
that.
That's,
Yes.
Yeah.
Well, that doesn't help.
No.
It doesn't help, but then it doesn't help if we say we're only interested in the land and not the building.
Right.
That's where we lost it the last time we did it. The trade-off is, you make the state bring it completely up to a usable condition. Everything fixed the way it needs to be fixed, so that it can generate money, either from the, you know, the rental upstairs, or if somebody has a wedding out there,
Right.
and it's not a townsperson, and you need, you know, to pay the bill,
Mhm.
you can charge a rental of the downstairs.
Right, and it's a beautiful location.
It is.
Oh, that's all.
I think that we need a good viable plan, I agree with you on that. I see it, I can see it in my own vision that this is a good piece of property for the town. And I think you're right, I think if they go by the guidelines that Strawberry Bank has set forth, which was a big thing at the time, and I was involved in back then, that would make it viable to the state as well as to us, because now we have a project that we can work with, and we can make it work.
Well, it gives us credibility.
I hate to run on you, but we're
I'm
gonna have to.
gone.
No, we're gonna, you can stay because we're leaving.
No, I'm sick of this place.
She was here last
Can we
night.
schedule, can you work with Karen and schedule another meeting so that we can sit down and
Please.
go over it before?
Yeah,
Love that, sit down again.
Karen, if you could probably give me a couple of days that works with you guys, I think that would be good.
That would give us a chance too to start thinking
Next
about
Tuesday,
the
the same
road.
time, next Tuesday at
Glad
1?
to.
And see, I was just brainstorming one night, but I
Well,
could
because
talk
24th is
about
the meeting.
several things.
We're gonna run out of time.
You
Next
know,
Tuesday at 1?
It works fine for me, I don't know what,
What day?
Next Tuesday at 1? Same time?
I have to go home and look at the
Yeah,
calendar.
we'll tentatively set up for that and you get
I do
back.
too, I have to.
So-
What's the date on that?
The
21st.
Right there,
21st at 2.
21st.
at 2 or 1?
One.
One.
Sorry, I was over
Like
by-
same
we
time,
over
same
by
place.
two. I did the whole time, but you're getting angry.
Well, these are very important because the
Yes.
consultant told me, that if we can photo document, something in an old photo, we
Mm-hmm.
have a good chance of being able to.
Absolutely.
Nice.
Absolutely. That's what they did at Strawberry Bank, they photo, they had a lot of old
So
photos,
we're
that's
gonna
how they did
construct
it.
a railroad across the bay? Is that
Yeah,
what we're
yeah,
saying?
you're gonna be the conductor.
Okay. I'm ready.
Thank you,
Thank
Lulu.
you.
You're
And
welcome.
let's
Thanks,
plan to
Lulu.
get back
Appreciate it.
and put the time in that it deserves.
Absolutely.
I think because we could end up